Good day, everyone. I am your instructor for this course, Research in Daily Life 2 or Practical Research 2. In this video lecture, I will be discussing to you Chapter 5 of the course, entitled Research Methodology Qualitative Design. So in this lecture, I will be discussing to you what is the research methodology for qualitative design. Learning objectives. Learning objectives. At the end of this lecture, you are expected to define the basic concept of research design for qualitative research, determine the appropriate study design, sampling design, and data analysis for qualitative research, and choose an appropriate design for your qualitative research. In qualitative research, experience is important, whether by you or by your respondents. Take note, class, that in qualitative research design, experience is very important, diba? Experience, it's either your experience as a researcher and experiences of your respondents. For the information of everyone, qualitative research design is commonly used in the field of social sciences such as sociology, anthropology, linguistics, history, diba? Even political sciences also use qualitative research design. And take note that experience is very important. What is qualitative research? Now, qualitative research is concerned with how the complexities of the social and cultural world are experienced, interpreted, and understood in a particular context at a particular point in time. As I've said kanina, diba, qualitative research is commonly used in social sciences disciplines such as sociology and anthropology. It is more concerned, diba? This research design is more concerned with dealing the complexities of the social world, the complexities of the cultural world are experienced, interpreted, and understood in a particular context and a particular point in time. Example of qualitative research is for in the field of anthropology, diba? Understanding of the cultural world, diba? Through experience, interpretation of the experience, and then understanding of the experience, diba? In a particular context or in a certain cultural group. Like for example, you wanted to know the culture of Subanen tribe, especially in Zamboanga Peninsula. So you will do a qualitative research, and then you will be applying ethnography. That means you will be describing the way of life of the Subanen tribe in or of your respondents, diba? Um, the way of life of your respondents, and then you are going to experience it, diba, as researcher, diba? What I mean is that in qualitative research, the researcher must go, diba? It is advisable that the researcher must go to a certain to the setting of the research, and then personally experience, diba, their culture, their way of living, and then you from your experiences, you will, as a researcher, you will draw your interpretation and then understanding in a particular context and in a particular time. That is qualitative research, more on understanding the complexities of the social world and cultural world through experiences of the researcher, and then and the respondents, and then out from these experiences will be interpreted and understood in a certain context and a certain point of time. That is qualitative research. For some, qualitative research is time consuming because, for example, ethnography, it is really advisable that for you to describe a certain ethnicity or cultural group, it is advisable that you will stay in a certain setting, the research setting, relocale, but in your locale of the study, you will stay through immersion in a particular place for at least 6 months to personally experience, diba, the way of living of a culture or cultural tribe or cultural group under study, and then personal experience, and then out from your experiences you can come up with your interpretation and understanding. That is how an example of qualitative research. Also, qualitative research puts emphasis on the discovery and description, diba? And the objectives are generally focused on extracting and interpreting the meaning of experience through meaningful reflection and understanding or reflexivity. Um, that is what I've mentioned kanina, that qualitative research is more on discovering of new things, diba? Understanding what further the complexity of the social world, the society, the cultural world, and then you are going to uh, it also emphasize that description, diba? The researcher will be describing the social world, the cultural world out from his or her experiences, and then extracting and interpreting meaning out from the experience through meaningful reflection and understanding. So qualitative research, unlike quantitative research is it involves statistical analysis, numerical data, and then statistical data, and after gathering data and then computing it, 'di ba? Computing it, analyzing it, you can actually interpret immediately the findings of the study. However, in qualitative research, it's not that simple, unlike quantitative research. In qualitative research, in QL, di ba, in qualitative, sa quali, the researcher must give enough time or must extend enough time in personally experiencing um, the context and the personally experience um, and then personally gather the data. What I mean is that si qualitative is the researcher uses no other instrument but he or himself, 'di ba? In qualitative research, there is no such thing as data gathering instrument, but the instrument is the researcher himself or herself, in which nakadepende sa iya ang findings or interpretation sa study, nakadepende sa iyang pag-interpret, 'di ba? Out from his experiences and through reflection and understanding. Now, in qualitative research, there are four common, di ba? There are four common design. Um, ethnography, the one I've made mention kanina, ethnography, grounded theory, case study, and phenomenology. So these are the common. There are many actually research design under qualitative research. However, these are the four common research design under qualitative research. So ethnography, grounded theory, case study, and phenomenology. Now, ethnography. This is my example kanina. Ethnography is a qualitative research design. It requires prolonged direct contact. Take note ha. It requires prolonged direct contact with a group or culture or subculture and its members with the aim of looking for rounded, holistic explanation on a certain phenomenon. It is also known as immersion or field work that originated from the field of cultural anthropology. Diba? Cultural anthropology. And this method is commonly used by anthropologists. For instance, Bronislaw Kasper Malinowski, diba? He is an anthropologist and he's fond of using field work or immersion in understanding a certain phenomenon. Now, ethnography is applicable when you wanted to study a certain group or a certain culture or subculture and its members, and the researcher is required to have prolonged contact or direct contact with the respondents of the study. What I am saying is that for you to understand their culture, their way of life in general, the researcher must personally experience, di personally experience firsthand the way of life the way of life or the way of living of a certain group or cultural group under study. That is why the researcher is required to have prolonged direct contact. So it is also known as immersion. When you say immersion, the researcher will go to the locale of the study and then live there for at least 6 months or more than 6 months to personally experience their way of life, diba? And to personally come up with holistic explanations on certain phenomenon or certain questions that you want to answer. For example, in ethnography, you wanted to evaluate some cultural texts, diba? Cultural text, um, literature of a certain group. Like for example, here in Buug, Zamboanga Peninsula, um, Subanen tribe or Subanen tribe is or Zamboanga Peninsula is known for Subanen tribe or, diba, or cultural group. So for you to have further or clear understanding of or for you to properly describe the culture of Subanen people in Zamboanga Peninsula, the researcher, you yourself, diba, as a researcher, is required to have prolonged contact with a Subanen group or Subanen people. Um, that means you are going to live in a particular place wherein you from time to time you can have direct contact with the group or respondents under study. So you yourself as a researcher, you personally experience, diba, their way of life, and then um, you personally experience um, their traditions, their um, customs, as well as um, you started to or sa language, di ba? Na-expose ka sa ilang language or in general, na-expose ka personally sa ilahang culture. And then, out from such experience you have, di ba? You can now create a graphic description or description of what you have experienced, and you can now start to answer your questions, di ba? You can have holistic explanation on certain questions. That is ethnography. The most common method used in this design is participant observation. Diba? Participant observation. So this method is commonly used, diba, in anthropology. In fact, participant observation was introduced by a certain anthropologist. Um, If I'm not mistaken, participant observation was introduced by Bronislaw Kasper Malinowski. So let me check. Bronislaw Kasper Malinowski. Okay, si Bronislaw Kasper Malinowski, he is associated with fieldwork, and fieldwork is the same with participant observation, wherein the participant or the researcher were personally the researcher observes, diba, while participating in the activities of the community. That means um, as a researcher using using ethnography or participant observation, diba, the most common method in this design, you are going to go to a particular place, diba, understudy, mingle, participate. Aside from participating, you are going to observe, diba, the activities of such community. So it was introduced by Bronislaw Kasper Malinowski. During this process, the research entails reflexivity or reflection. So during the process of participation and observation, from time to time, the researcher will be involved or will be doing various reflection while the researcher is working with the people in a natural setting. This process requires someone to use emic or insiders and ethic outsiders point of view to understand the topic being studied. So uh, also using participant observation or ethnography. So this process requires someone to use emic insiders, meaning you are going to describe, diba, the cultural tribe or your respondents, diba, their culture for cultural studies in an outsider's point of view, and that is called emic. And you are going also to describe it in ano uh, insider's point of view, that is emic, and then outsider's point of view, that is ethic, diba? To understand the topic being studied. Other methods can also be used when doing ethnography include but not limited to ethnographic interviewing. Still, it involves of it involves of going to a particular community or a certain place which is said to be the locale of your study, and conduct some interview, diba? Conduct interview on the culture of a certain group under study. Also, for some they prefer to have key informant interviewing or key informant interview. They don't need to interview all members of the community, like for example tananin mo na kayo halubilo, but the researcher will be interviewing only the key informant, wherein the leader, di ba, the barangay official, nga siya na ang mo represent, sila na ang mo represent sa a whole tribe, whole community under study. So key informant lang. And then documentary analysis. So some researchers really document, diba? Document the activities of the community while participating and while observing, and then out from the documentation, so the researcher will conduct documentary analysis. The researcher himself will analyze the document, diba? The activities being documented. Now, common tools required of an ethnographer are observation guide, di ba? Kailangan ka observation guide, and then field notes. Di lang kay simple lang observation anto na kadidto. You have to have as a researcher you must have observation guide as well as field notes, which will serve as your guide, di ba? It is the and which will serve as your guide in doing ethnography. However, take note that in qualitative research, di ba, in qualitative research, there is no such thing as data gathering instrument compared to quantitative, because in quantitative in quantitative or sa quanti, pwede makamagamit og na in guided interview questions, and then aside from that questionnaire, di ba, survey questionnaire. Pero in qualitative, you can only have field notes and observation guide or interview guide, di ba? Questionnaire this time is no longer applicable. And take note, in qualitative research, the researcher himself is the main instrument, meaning the findings of the study depends on your analysis, depends on your understanding and interpretation out from your observation and interaction with the respondents being studied. Now, examples of ethnography are Delgado and Cruz 2014, entitled Multi-Event Ethnography. So they conducted ethnography on multi-event doing research in pluralistic setting. Bautista and Brolin 2014, entitled Ethnography as an Act of Witnessing, doing fieldwork on passion rituals in the Philippines. So nakafocus siya sa rituals in the Philippines. Okay, next, design under qualitative research is phenomenology. Phenomenology is actually a method used in the field of philosophy. In phenomenology class, diba, in phenomenology, the truth, diba, phenomenology is a scientific study of phenomenon, appearances, and then out from studying appearances, phenomenon, and also by studying person's consciousness, you can have your deeper understanding of the phenomenon under study. Or in phenomenology as method of philosophy, It tries to understand things, diba, by evaluating, diba, by evaluating the consciousness, the awareness of the people of the particular phenomenon being studied. The main objective of this research design is to enlarge. So the main objective is to enlarge and deepen the understanding of the range of immediate experiences in ordinary everyday life. So ang main objective ani nga design, research design is i-enlarge, diba? Deeper imong understanding of the various experiences in ordinary everyday life. Diba? From time to time, we are confronted with various phenomenon, diba? Appearances, activities. We are experiencing a lot as human being, and then so phenomenology, it will help you to enlarge, it will help you to deepen your understanding of the various experiences in ordinary everyday life. This is done by giving and putting forward meaningful description on human experiences obtained through in-depth interviews. So, muna siya pamaagi ni phenomenology. Sa philosophy, it is a method in understanding, it is a method um, in understanding the underlying reasons of the underlying reasons by evaluating human consciousness out from human experiences to understand the subject being or under study. So it's all about um, putting forward meaningful description of human experiences through in-depth interview. So unsay gusto nga makuha sa in-depth interview. So in-depth interview is a deeper interview to and then it's all about evaluating one's consciousness about the problem being studied, diba? One's consciousness, one's awareness of the problem being studied. Now, phenomenology in short, the researcher describes the reality of the experience through narratives, and the respondents who distinctly live and experience the particular phenomenon being studied. So it's more on evaluating the consciousness, diba? Nakafocus kasi si phenomenology on consciousness of the people about the phenomenon or about the appearances, about the experience, diba? And then it is more on describing the reality of such experience through narratives and the respondents who distinctly live and experience that particular phenomenon under study. This design and technique originated from the field of philosophy, as made mention kanina, diba? It's a method of philosophy, method of philosophizing, understanding the truth of a particular thing, understanding a certain phenomena, appearances through evaluating one's experiences and one's consciousness about the phenomenon being studied. Example is that Thompson 1997 entitled Interpreting Consumers, diba? A hermeneutic framework for deriving marketing insights from the text of consumers' consumptions stories. Hermeneutic framework, interpreting consumers. So for deriving marketing insights from text of consumer consumption stories. So this requires in-depth interview on various customers to derive marketing insights, diba, out from consumers' consumption stories. Next is grounded theory. The main idea of this design is to conceptualize. So the main idea is to conceptualize and create a theory grounded or based on the data gathered in the field. The creation of this theory is derived in the words and actions of individuals under study or data. Diba? So si grounded theory, ang iyang main idea is to conceptualize, to create a concept, to create a theory grounded on a particular data being gathered. Muna siyang grounded theory. And the creation of such theory is derived in the words and actions of individuals under study or data. Forms of data collection under grounded theory. No. Forms of data collection. So, survey, case study, interview, life history, and secondary data. So dili na siya part sa grounded theory ha. So ang research design under qualitative research are ethnography, grounded theory, and then the other one is phenomenology. So si grounded theory, the researcher is going to conceptualize to create a theory grounded on the data gathered in the field. Next is forms of data collection. So um, you might asking how, diba, in conducting qualitative research, how are you going to collect the data? So kanina na tayo natagaan mo og bird's eye view, right? Like conducting in-depth interview, conducting participant observation wherein you are going to immerse yourself as researcher in a particular place, live with a certain group that you want to study you want to understand their culture for cultural studies and many more. Now, there are forms of data collection aside from interview. So, pwede po survey, diba? Survey. So, pwede survey but really different from quantitative research wherein ang survey, ma-interpret siya through statistical measures. Conducting case study, diba? Analyzing the case of a particular or a certain problem. So, out from providing solution. So, data gathered through analyzing cases. Naputay interview, in-depth interview or structured interview. Data are gathered in qualitative research through interview of the respondents. So usually in qualitative research, the respondents are small. So dili necessary sa qualitative research nga daghan imong respondents. Mas better kung daghan pero dili siya necessary. There are some qualitative research wherein there are only 4, there are only 6 or 10 respondents. Also, life history. This form of data collection is also applicable in the field of history and sociology, diba? Life history, anthropology, even anthropology. Life history, another form of data collection. Also, secondary data. Secondary data can be also a form of data collection. So, atong isa-isahon. It involves the intensive description and analysis of phenomenon for case study, social unit or system bound by time or place, which is considered as a case to gain an in-depth understanding of the situation and the meaning of those involved. The interest is in the process rather than outcome. So, ang interest is nakatutok sa process, not sa outcomes. The interest is in process, nakatutok sa process rather than outcomes. Context rather than specific. Variable, discovery rather than confirmation. So this is case study. So you are studying a certain case. So you are understanding not the outcome of the case but the process, diba? Understanding the context, the discovery rather than in a confirmation. The case to be understood should have a distinct problem or issue to be resolved based on the present context as observed by the researcher and possibly the people inside the company. No, sampling frame. How to conduct sampling frame for qualitative research? Applicable ba ang sampling frame sa qualitative research? Now, in sampling, the participants of the respondents in a qualitative research constitute the sample of individuals. So the participants constitute the sample of individuals who will be observed or interviewed based on their experience or their knowledge on the phenomenon being studied. As I made mention kanina, in qualitative research, the number of participants or the number of respondents are not that actually strict or to be emphasized, unlike quantitative research. So si qualitative research, pwede ra nga gamay ra imuhang participants or respondents, di ba? As long as you can gather relevant or essential data personally through interview and observation on the phenomenon and being studied. So, sampling frame for qualitative research. Unlike sa quantitative research wherein you have to use various methods such as determine first the sample size out from the population and then determine what sampling type is, either probability ba or non-probability. So sa qualitative research, the sampling frame is all about the participants constitute the sample of individuals. So ever the participants, they are the sample individuals. And then in qualitative research, sa akong balik-balikon, um, dili necessary nga daghan og respondents or participants, because you have to conduct interview one by one, diba? And based on their experience or based on the knowledge of the phenomenon being studied. That was um, qualitative research design, research methodology. If you have questions, class, feel free to message me or to comment it in the comment section. Thank you and God bless us all.